So the first question is, can you please introduce yourself to our readers and share a few details about your professional background?
Well, my name is Robert Rickover. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and I've been teaching for about 40-ish, more than 40 years. I previously was, for a brief period, a metallurgical engineer, and for a longer period, a research economist. But I've been an Alexander teacher for a great many years.
Uh,
And I don't know what else you'd like to know, but that's the basics.
Wonderful. Uh, for those unfamiliar with it, can you explain what exactly Alexander Technique is and how it works?
Well, I think of the technique as a way of learning how to move through life with a greater ease, less unnecessary strain, um, just making whatever you do uh, easier, more efficient, less likely to cause you pain and discomfort, that sort of thing. That would be a very short description of the technique. It's usually taught um, often one-on-one, one teacher, one student, and until the last, say, decade or so, it's been mostly taught in person. I think it still is mostly taught in person, but I've been teaching online for quite a few years, and I find that a more efficient way to teach the work. Not all teachers do that.
Great. And can you walk me through a typical or most common Alexander Technique session?
That's a tough one because basically every lesson is about where the student is at that moment and who that particular student is. And so there's no standard first, second, third lesson kind of thing. Um, Generally, at the beginning of teaching, I would tend to emphasize the first lesson or so. I would do a little of what is called in the Alexander technique body mapping, which is getting the student to learn on him or herself where key joints are in their body, what key structural aspects of their body. So it's a kind of a very simple anatomy, but it's not anatomy at a distance. It's anatomy about you, your own self. And that can often in itself create some pretty interesting changes in the student's ability to move and move more easily and to improve their posture.
Yeah.
But I will say also that after that, the most important thing that I teach is how a student can learn how to self-direct him or herself. My goal is to get the student um, able to look after themselves without my help. I'm not interested in dozens of lessons, any sort of dependency on me. I'm hoping that they will learn how to look after themselves. And I find that usually that can be pretty quick after maybe 10 or 12 sessions, sometimes less than that.
Wonderful. And can you tell me what is constructive rest?
Oh, constructive rest. Well, that's an aspect of the technique that's really open to anybody to explore. You don't have to be taking Alexander lessons. It's basically a position where you lie on the floor, usually on a carpet or a yoga mat. You have some support under your head, and your knees are elevated relative to your hips. So sometimes it could be your legs bent and your feet flat on the floor, or it could be something under your knees like a roller that keeps them higher than your hips. And that configuration in itself takes as much compression off your spine as you can do in a normal situation. It's a very powerful method that anybody can use that can make quite a big difference. They don't have to be taking Alexander lessons, and it might be a good idea to include a link to a page that is all about constructive rest. It's simple, requires almost nothing in terms of equipment, and it's something that I think most Alexander teachers and students do pretty regularly, but you don't have to be involved in this work to take advantage of it.
Thank you very much. And you also host a podcast. What can you tell me about that part of your work?
Well, I'm an early adapter to podcasting. My podcast, I think now I think it's about 13 or 14 years old. What I wanted to do was find a way of reaching people whose first entry into hearing about the technique or learning about it was not necessarily the printed page. Not everyone wants to go and get a book and start reading it or read a lengthy article about it. People don't have a lot of time these days, and it's something that could be useful to someone to just listen to while they're commuting to work, or cleaning the house or whatever. And I've been quite amazed at the popularity of it. The number of downloads is really shockingly high. I never anticipated that. So it's just another way of introducing people to the work from the very beginning, and then a lot of specialized activities. So there are a lot of podcasts that are really aimed at musicians or some dancers or athletes or whatever. There's just a huge range. And maybe we could sneak in a little link, not necessarily a hyperlink, but a link to that podcast page, because anyone can look up what seems to be relevant to them on that page and probably find something that'll be useful to them.
Yep, agreed. And can you share a memorable success story?
Well, I think every Alexander teacher has lots of these stories. So I don't want to put myself out as having a special ability to magically transform somebody. But I was thinking about that question because it's an odd question for an Alexander teacher to get. So about a year ago, I had a student in Taiwan who was a violinist, and she was just getting started in a professional capacity. She's very talented, but she had a huge amount of pain in her neck and shoulders. And it got to the point where she was somewhat concerned about actually continuing this career that she had devoted so much work to. So, and it was also a bit of an emergency situation. She had a big concert that evening and she wanted help right away. Normally, we're thinking in terms of a little longer term than that, but I thought, okay, I'll see what I can do. Fortunately, she had a full-length mirror that she could stand in front of so she could observe herself. And I asked her to just start playing something. And immediately I could see, it took a little while to get her to see it, but I could see that what she was doing when she placed the violin on her shoulder was not to just place it on her shoulder, but to hunch that shoulder up like crazy, and that it stayed up the whole time she was playing. And I thought, well, that's going to not be very comfortable for the neck. So I got her to just practice not even playing, just placing this object called the violin on her shoulder and do nothing. It took about 15 minutes to get that. But once she got that, I said, okay, put it on your shoulder. Don't do anything except move your bowing arm and play something for me. And she couldn't believe the difference. It was a huge, huge difference. And that's a kind of a body working thing and a body mapping thing in a way. And we went on to have a series, I think, of about a dozen lessons over the next few months. But she said, she told me the next day she had never played more comfortably in a concert. And I thought, well, that's a pretty simple intervention. It's based on basically observing in yourself what you're doing that's getting in the way and learning how to stop doing it, which is a pretty key element to the Alexander technique.
Wonderful. Sorry, you wanted to continue? Did I cut you off?
That's it. I mean, I consider that kind of a success story.
Yep, yeah, it definitely is,
Yeah, but I want to
huge thing.
emphasize that I think any competent Alexander teacher could have helped her in that, not necessarily did exactly what I did at that time, but would have addressed that pretty quickly, because it's very apparent. Alexander teachers are very tuned in to observing people's patterns. And, she had been doing this without any awareness she was doing it until I kind of woke her up to it, you might say. So, yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Thank you very much. And that's it, what we have for prepared questions. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't covered?
No, not really. I think anyone who's experiencing discomfort or pain or who feels they're not doing what they want to be doing as efficiently as they might be, and this would be particularly for performers, musicians, dancers, actors, where their livelihood depends on their ability to play or to dance or whatever really well. It's highly competitive. Everything's sort of based on that. But anyone who is in that situation or is feeling discomfort and feeling pain when they do certain activities, it would be worth exploring this work. It's been around for, I guess, now over 120 years. It's not new. There are teachers all over the world. There are a lot of teachers who work online these days, so it's pretty easy for someone to find a teacher. Give it a try, would be my advice. And you'd know pretty quickly whether it was useful. You wouldn't have to keep coming for lesson after lesson. Most students either aren't that interested and they drop out right away, or they stay with it for, enough lessons to make a big difference in their life.
Thank you very much. Let me stop recording.